Hey guys, welcome to Sonic Discovery. I am your host, David Correa, and on this episode we'll be going over music from A.A.L, Screaming Females, and the debut album from rapper TF. Welcome to the show. If this is the first time you're tuning in to Sonic Discovery, let me kind of quickly go over what it is that I do. So, every Friday there's tons of music that comes out, and if you were to try to listen to everything, oh man, your head would explode. So it's really overwhelming. So what I do is, I pick out a few titles that look interesting to me, and then I check them out, and I post reviews on the show. So then all you got to do is watch this and, determine for yourself if it's something that is worth, for you to check out, or, if you don't want to take my advice, do whatever you want. First up on the show, we have a release from A.A.L, which stands for Against All Logic. The name of this album is 2012 to 2017. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this artist, well, basically, we all are. It happens to be an alias of the artist Nicolas Jaar. And, he's an electronic artist that mostly does things that are much calmer, more like down-tempo, chill stuff. And this is something very different. This is a lot dancier. But before we get into that, let me go into a little of Nicolas Jaar. So if you're not familiar with him, he's only released a few albums, but they're definitely worth checking out. His debut album, Space is Only Noise, is great. His follow-up, Sirens, is also really good. And a side project that he did with another collaborator, they were known as Dark Side, and they released a really good album called Physics. And all three of those albums are worth checking out. But like I mentioned, this is very different. It's much more of a dancier vibe. We still get experimentation that Nicolas is known for. The album opens with This Old House Is All I Have. And this is kind of like a groovy sound, very soulful as well, as basically in the lyrics, they're talking about the foundations that we're used to are no longer there or falling apart. I mostly love this track. The only thing that kind of got in the way is as it gets started, there's a lot of static that you hear, which, I don't know why it was incorporated into the mix, but it's there, and it was a little annoying. I Never Dream has overall really great production and a great buildup that leads us to a really great rhythmic beat. The sample on here basically tells you how the song makes you feel. It just makes me feel so good. Some Kind of Game has a very quick rhythmic beat, and this one also incorporates piano and vocals that kind of give the song more of a gospel quality to it. Hopeless is an overall great house track that has some really interesting, dreamy composition over the beat. The next, Know You, is part electronic and part funk, and I thought it did a really good job of balancing both sides equally. The vocals here are pitched up really high, as it's basically a guy meeting a girl at a party and, trying to convince her to just have a good time and give in to the music. Such a Bad Way is a much calmer song, and it even uses a Kanye sample, but still, it was a little underwhelming to me. It just sounded a little disjointed. City Fade is another calming track, but this has a constant beat, and also there's a lot of really interesting instrumentation going on all throughout the track. Now You Got Me Hooked is given a soulful quality with the sample that is used on here. This one does something really interesting, where the beat, is there with the song, but then the beat kind of goes away and lets the bed of the music just kind of be there. And then, suddenly, like, the beat just kind of is subtly introduced back into the song. And it does this a couple times, and I really love the effect from that. Flash in the Pan is one that was okay. It's a little weird because it sounds like there's two different songs going on simultaneously, but yet they're kept together by this one constant beat. You Are Going to Love Me and Scream has a really cool ripple effect that's created from the beat, and also this eeriness that goes on with the synth pattern and the static that is incorporated into this track. And then the album closes out with Rave on You, which has a great percussive beat and a pitch shifting that happens on the melody throughout. Overall, it was interesting that Nicolas decided to, give us a whole different style of music, and it makes sense that he gives this to us under a different name. And, from the title 2012 to 2017, it seems like he's just been collecting these tracks throughout the years. I really enjoyed this album. This is going to get a score of an 8.5 out of 10 from me. So if you're a fan of Nicolas or just electronic music in general, I highly recommend you give this a listen. Next up for review, we have the newest album from New Jersey band Screaming Females. This is called All at Once. Now, I myself am not familiar with this band. I do know that they're from New Jersey, that they are on their 7th album, and that they've released all of their records through an independent label. The band is comprised of Marissa Porternoster, who does vocals and guitar, Jared Doherty, which plays drums, and King Mike, which is on bass. And what we get from this album is a really great, solid rock record with, sometimes some punk energy and always a lot of accessible moments. The hooks on here are really catchy, and there's a few here that, might get you singing along as well. The opening track, Glass House, has some quieter moments, but it also has these really powerful strums and also a really killer ending. Here she talks about it being impossible to be in a place of peace or serenity with, with the digital age, and always having to, be available. Constantly, you are able to be reached through your phone, through messaging, through your computer, just never stops. Black Moon is a steady rocker with a very urgent and catchy chorus. Here, she might be talking about the preconceived notion that men are here to rule and to be served. Agnes Martin is another great rocker with a pummeling crunch from the guitar and the cymbals, and a lot of really great soloing throughout. On Deeply, the band brings it down to a slower number, and this is quite beautiful, as she's talking about either falling deeper in love or out of love. I was a little unclear as to which one. Soft Domination is another steady rocker with a really great chorus. Here she's saying that she's waiting for somebody to come out and take her out of this place. But I do get a hint of cynicism, so I'm not really sure exactly if she's actually saying that or if she means the opposite. End of My Bloodline is another calmer moment where the rhythm here kind of has like a snake quality to it. Here she talks about wanting to hold on to your identity. Chamber for Sleep Part 1 is a track that gets a lot more musically compelling the further it goes along. We get guitar solos, we get a really extended outro, which then leads us to the next track, which is part 2 of the song, and this one is much more faster and peppier in sound. Bird in Space has a simplicity to it, but also this familiarity to it. So when you hear it, it sounds like something that you may have already heard before. This is one of those songs that has a chorus that has a great singability to it. Also here, the guitar does kind of get to stretch out a bit as it throws you a couple solos. Fantasy Lens gives us more of a punk energy, and here again, we have another catchy chorus. On here, she's wanting to be loved for the person that she is and not for the person that they perceive her to be. And the closing track, Step Outside, starts off with this really long, sprawling intro as it then segues into a much faster punk sound. This one talks about people that just want to see you fail or have something bad happen to you, just so they see something happen. All those tracks were great, and there's also a few on here that I thought were still pretty good. I'll Make You Sorry, Drop by Drop, and My Body are still worth checking out. Overall, I was really pleased with this release, especially not knowing anything about this band. This is going to get a score of an 8 out of 10 from me. So if you want to hear a great rock record with punk energy and catchy hooks, then definitely give this a try. And closing out this episode, we have the debut album from LA rapper TF. This is called Everything Scandalous. So like I mentioned, this is the debut album for TF. If you've heard of him before, he did do a verse on Tookie Knows 2, which was on the latest record from Schoolboy Q. And he also released his EP, No Hooks, last year. And I previously talked about that EP on an episode from last year. So if you're interested in hearing my take, go ahead and check that one out. As for this definitely shows a lot of promise from this young rapper. He's really establishing himself with a really good flow, and also his choice of production, because the production on this album is really great. Very different from the last one. The last one kind of had more of like a darker sound, but here he incorporates a lot of tracks that have much more of a soulful sound. The opening track is the title track, Everything Scandalous, and on here we get a banging beat with a nice harp sound throughout, and also I especially like the sound of the hi-hats on here. On this track, he proclaims to be from the streets and not be one of those rappers that's popping bottles in the club. Misguided was one of my personal favorites. This has a great rhythmic beat with bongos, strings, and a delayed guitar. On here he says that despite making bad choices as a kid, now he's on the right track to really make it in music. The Struggle gives us soulful production with nice synths, as he talks about the struggle that you have to go through in order to make it to the other side. The Great White Hype is another soulful track with really great background vocals as he talks about the drug culture. Leather Seats features Charlie Wah, and on here, this has a really steady beat with great production and a really nice groove. Here, he plans for his next move to make it to the top. Residential gives us another banging beat, one that would be good to hear in your car, and the sound of this reminded me a lot of something that I'd kind of hear YG on. Mama and Them is the ballad of the album, as he expresses how much he cares for everything his mother has done for him. And the album closes on the more aggressive track, G Code. On here he says that no matter what happens and what changes, he's always going to live by that G Code. Those are the songs that I thought were really great, and there's still a few that I thought, were still pretty good and worth a listen, like Archives Interlude, which just has him looking towards the future. Why Buck, which is another track that has soulful production, and we have a harder delivery from him on this track. And the One Punch Interlude, which actually highlights another rapper, One Punch, and kind of gives him a minute or so to show what he's able to do on the mic. Overall, I was really pleased with this debut. I went to the release party and I loved the energy that I saw there. So I'm hoping it continues and that I see a lot of great stuff from TF in the future. This is going to get a score of an 8 out of 10 from me. So if you're interested in checking out a rapper that's just getting started, then definitely give this a listen. Well, guys, that closes out another episode. 3 albums definitely worth giving a listen to. If you have any recommendations for things you may want me to check out, go ahead and leave those at the bottom in the comment section. And while you're there, go ahead and hit the like button or subscribe. On the next episode, we'll be covering music from The Breeders, Moby, and Soccer Mom.